It was Chinese revolutionary leader Mao Zedong who said, "Everything under the heavens is in chaos. The situation is excellent." This phrase adequately describes the situation in the United States right now. The riots, which began after the killing of George Floyd, seem to have no end in sight. And in fact, they have escalated to even greater degrees. In now many cities across the United States, riots are breaking out, some of them even reaching the gates of the White House, in which protesters chanted, threatening to storm the actual White House itself. And New York City is one of the major hotspots where the police have now been overrun by rioters. Multiple reports of officers being down. Multiple police precincts in NYC have now been taken over by protesters demonstrating their fury at the death of George Floyd. And now, according to law enforcement sources, protests in honor of George Floyd began at Barclays, making its way to the 79th and 88th precinct. Roughly 150 to 200 arrests were carried out. New York Police Department vehicles were set on fires by rioters and protesters, and they managed to break into the 79th precinct and were quickly arrested. Dozens of officers were injured. Police were seen in videos and social media posts just beating protesters with batons, starting with the usual attacking the lower body, particularly the legs, in an attempt to immobilize the person, and then striking higher, much more dangerous, and intending to cause injury, etc. As even a single arrest is being attempted to be made, several protesters are swarming the police, trying to prevent them from doing so. And that is the situation that the police find themselves in right now. Despite the best efforts of the police in New York to disperse people hours later, many protesters still remain in those locations, causing grief for those police officers. It has gotten so bad in Georgia that the Governor Brian Kemp has activated the National Guard and sent them with a statewide emergency situation as demonstrations in Atlanta expanded beyond just protesting to rioting and looting. Now, this was mostly sparked by the police killing of the Minneapolis man earlier this week. Obviously, this is not all about simply George Floyd, but the general brutality with which the African American population is saddled with every single day. People would not be this outraged over the death of a single man, but as the single death in a repeated chain of events, of a continuous oppression over a very long period of time. You don't get a number of people like this exploding for no reason. Something made this set off. The mayhem erupted in downtown Atlanta, where arsonists set fire to several cars, including police vehicles, with reports of several other fires around the city. And in many of the places of the country where the National Guard were sent in to actually try to control the situation, they had to leave because they were simply overwhelmed. And a situation like this has not been seen in, I believe it was about 34 years. It's been 34 years since something like this has happened. So think about that. The people are overwhelming the National Guard. The people who with the commercial on television saying that you'll serve your community by being in the National Guard, and by serve your community enforce a racist, sexist, a racist, capitalist, imperialist system. Because nothing says serve your community like continuing to defend police brutality and murder against your community. Well, one of the noteworthy events that took place outside the White House, because the White House is a very difficult place to get into, The thought of actually storming the White House is something that would be almost unthinkable. And it is not something that has not happened since the War of 1812, when Canadian forces sacked the building and burned it to the ground. But what happened there? A Fox News journalist was run off from the premises. If there's one thing African Americans don't want to hear, it's the opinion of Fox News. I mean, I don't think I really have to tell anybody the history of racism and prejudice that has come out of the Fox News Broadcasting Corporation, News Corp, etc. And you could also rightfully mention the amount of sexism as well. Why Bill O'Reilly is not on there anymore. And then you could go into all things like Roger Ailes, etc. But here's where things are about to get kicked up to an even higher degree. The Pentagon is planning on sending military police to Minneapolis to try to restore order in the city, according to several reports. There's more than one source for this. After 4 straight nights of unrest, the Army personnel in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Fort Drum, New York, have been ordered to be ready to deploy within 4 hours if called, the Associated Press reported. So think about this. This isn't just the National Guard anymore. This is the military police of the United States. So I want you to think about this. Because there is a prevalent idea that somehow people who join the military are fighting for their country or are defending their country. I mean, you'd have to be a fool to think that at this point. You'd basically have to ignore the entire history of the United States to think that's true. But to those left who still believe it, think about what's happening right now. That military force that swore, I believe they swore an oath to the Constitution to defend it, are now being used to attack the American people directly. And I remember so many libertarians telling me, oh, that would never happen. Because the Army is there to defend the country, not control it. Because somehow America is unique, and just because other countries have military dictatorships, that would totally never happen in the United States because of some supposed virtue of America. Now, I've seen even some Minutemen militia types saying that, spouting essentially this is the only way for their ideology to work, is some kind of NWO conspiracy claiming that the armies of other countries will have to be called into the U.S. to suppress the population because the American army would never do that. And that's like a legit point that they actually tried to make. So I want you to think about that. To all those who glorify the United States Army as being the force to defend freedom, they might be just about to get called up to kill you, to defend that same system that you claim to be against. And despite all the bluster of how that would totally never happen, because the military in the imperialist army is such a holy and untouchable and uncriticizable career, you're about to learn that it's not. And keep one thing in mind. Aren't the police sworn to serve and protect the public? And somehow it's going to be different if you use the military? What the police do to the American people, and particularly the African American population, is what the U.S. Army does to the Third World. They're not better people. They don't have a very strict moral code that makes them different. And this was one of the criticisms that I made of the New York Maoists, who said they wanted to, that somehow the U.S. military were proletarians and that they were being exploited by the army, but they would refuse to ally with the police. It's kind of a complete double standard there. But the group no longer exists anyway. But this is the situation that the United States finds itself in right now. When you take enough abuse and you finally turn around and you start attacking that system that's attacking you, you're going to see the fangs of the U.S. empire. Up until now, for the most part, those fangs, the truly murderous fangs, were something that existed overseas, and you got a medal for it, and it was done to somebody else. And right now, the U.S. population, particularly the African American population, is about to get a taste of that themselves. You're going to see when the chips are down and people are really, really fed up with being treated like garbage. And you're going to see how capitalism in crisis, or capitalism in decay, turns into fascism. And that's exactly what we're about to see if these riots don't stop. And I'm not advocating that they stop. I'm saying there's definitely righteous anger, but be ready for what's coming. And it's going to be bad. If they're already going to kill you in the street when they arrest you for nothing, think of what they'll also do. And in the midst of this, and the incompetence of Trump, he's gone to Twitter, and all the criticism that had been made of him for quoting a racist sheriff from way back defending lynchings. He tweeted out China. Now, I assume that was some attempt to create some kind of external enemy to make everybody come together against the common enemy that is China. It's nonsense. There are portions of the United States falling apart right now because of the injustice that was done to the people doing it. And Trump is doing everything he can to distract from it. I did a spot on Press TV yesterday talking about Trump's decision to remove Hong Kong's special status and pulling out of the WHO. And amazing that he just decided at the time to do that, to put that in the news, hoping that it would distract from the riots going on. And as he gave that press conference, would not answer any questions about the riots taking place. Because I guarantee you, he has no idea what to do. He doesn't know what he's doing. So he's come up with another idea. Something that will hopefully placate the righteous anger of those who have been abused in the United States. He's declared African American Music Month, where for 1 month out of the year, African American music is celebrated, venerated. Think about that. Isn't that the essence of liberalism right there? We're going to give you this nice, soft, meaningless, cosmetic month of reflection and do absolutely nothing to take care of the systemic problem that is violence against the African American community. It's that moment when Trump goes completely full liberal. If that's not a liberal democracy BS thing kind of thing to do, then nothing is. So think about that. You're getting killed in the street, and the best thing Trump could do to try to take care of that situation, that injustice that's being committed, is to say, oh, 1 month a year we'll appreciate your music. Think about that. I don't want to engage in any schadenfreude of watching the Trump administration fail socially. But that is what's going on right now. It is failing. The system is failing. You've got these riots, the coronavirus outbreak, a pending severe economic catastrophe. U.S. imperialism is actually failing in many places around the world. The end of the American empire is here. And in this most dangerous time for the U.S. empire, they have the most incompetent leader that has ever led the country in charge right now. He does not know what to do. He's relied on Mike Pompeo to tell him what to do for foreign policy. He has no vision of what the country is supposed to be. Make America Great Again is a completely vague campaign bumper sticker slogan that doesn't mean anything. Like end the Fed. Stuff like that. And then in the coming weeks, we're going to see exactly where this is going to go. Regardless of what happens, we're going to see the true face of the U.S. empire domestically, probably in a way that we have never seen before. And that's going to be the gut check moment for the American people, particularly African Americans in this situation. How much abuse are you going to take before you finally do something? That while we cannot call this revolution, we cannot call this a leftist action, we can call it the actions of a righteous anger that are exploding out into the public that may very well force some kind of change. None of us are soothsayers. We cannot tell what's going to happen. But to quote Eminem from 8 Mile, because I think it's appropriate, something has to happen. And it has to happen now.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.